because they were firing tear gas into the house, I actually thought they were going from bedroom to bedroom shooting my friends, and I was in the last bedroom. So we were boarded by the Irish Navy and the guards. We were clearly informed on, and we were arrested. And I ended up getting 10 years in Portlaoise prison for that. And then he reached out and shook my hand and he says, "John, I'm with a different agency." As soon as he said that, I knew what he meant, the CIA. And again, as soon as he said that, I knew what was coming. A sales pitch. It's very well documented across a wide range of sources. British involvement in loyalist death squads, And if that isn't terrorism, I don't know what is.
Yeah, good stuff, John. Thanks very much for joining us, and we'll get into your whole life and your whole story. But can you give us like a quick bio, kind of who you are and what the book is about?
Well, basically, my name is John Crawley, and the book is about my time as an Irish IRA volunteer in the Irish Republican Army. I was also in the US Marines for 4 years. And basically, my background is I was born in the States to Irish immigrant parents in 1957. I was born in Long Island. My father was in the Air Force at the time. He was just doing a 4-year stint to get technical training and to accelerate his American citizenship. At about 2 years of age, we moved to Chicago, so I don't remember New York. Grew up, had a normal childhood, and then when I was about 13, I came to Ireland for a full summer and loved it. And then the following year, when I was 14, I moved to Ireland for good. I lived in Ireland and went to school in Ireland between 14 and 18 years of age, which, as a young teenager, are very formative years. And while I didn't come from a Republican background or anything like that, my father would have been Fianna Fáil, my mother, Fine Gael. I developed a strong interest in Republicanism from my reading and from my study. And the troubles were on at that stage, and I felt that while Irish men and women were fighting for the full freedom and independence of their country, I wanted to take part. And so I decided to join the IRA. But at 18 years of age, I didn't know anybody in the IRA. I lived in sort of a middle class area in South Dublin, and the IRA isn't called a secret army for nothing. So and they don't have recruiting offices. So what I did was I went to the United States. I joined the US Marines. I eventually got into their Special Forces Unit Recon. I became an instructor. I made sergeant in only 3 years because I had several meritorious promotions. And I got out of the Marines on the 29th of May, 1979. At 8 o'clock in the morning, I was discharged, and at 2 o'clock that afternoon, I was on a connecting flight home to Ireland.
Wow.
Where I rapidly, tried to join the IRA. Yeah, so I was on a mission.
Let me take you back then a small bit. You moved from Chicago, a major US city, to I believe Roscommon. As like a young teen, kind of mid-teens. Yes. Do you remember I suppose you would have had the summer there before, but do you remember your first impressions? It must have been
I really loved it. I lived with an aunt for a year. Well, my mother and father didn't come over for a further year. They were settling their American affairs. So I lived with an aunt and an uncle. And, I'd come from this middle-class Chicago home to, a nice farm, a lovely farm. But, there was no central heating. Used to go to the well for water. They were still milking by hand. And the farm next door was still plowing with a horse and plow. This is 1972, I think. I think that was the last year they did it. So I remember going to the creamery with the neighbor with an ass and cart. So it was sort of the end of an era. I just come at the very end of an era in Ireland, But I took to it and I loved it. I absolutely loved Ireland. I loved everything about it. And my sister had come over too, but she went to boarding school and she didn't like it at all. So the first chance she got, she went back to the States. But even though I, even though I had every intention coming back from the Marines and joining the IRA, if I didn't get into the IRA or anything like that, I was still going to come home and live in Ireland because I just considered Ireland my home. I know that might seem a little bit strange after just 4 years in Ireland, but I grew up in an Irish household in Chicago where Ireland was always called home. My parents, were both from Ireland. Our relatives were all Irish. Everybody who visited us was Irish. A lot of the kids I went to school with had Irish parents. In fact, when I first went to school, I pronounced some words with an Irish accent. I remember my teacher actually saying to me, "Your mother and father from Ireland," because of certain way I pronounce certain words. So
you were
yeah,
probably saying Z instead of Z.
well, I was saying
H,
H and instead of
oh,
H,
yeah, exactly.
Z, you know, and yeah, and Z and Z, that type of thing. And but I did, I would have considered myself American as a kid, but or as an Irish American, but it was really when I was in Ireland, I really developed a really deep love and attachment to Ireland, and I joined the Marines, and I liked the United States, and I had a lot of admiration for the American Republic. I would have a lot of reservations about a lot of American foreign policy and things like that, but for the actual system of the Republic and the democracy there, I'd be very supportive of that and the Constitution. But
Can I ask you? Sorry, you said you didn't come from like a particularly like Irish Republican home. So one of the things I wondered the most was where where you got your influences. Like, do you remember? Do you remember even the first time, like kind of learning about the War of Independence and Civil War?
Yeah. Well, I would have read a lot about that because I always liked history. I always liked politics. I never was really into fiction, and even as a young fella, I did a lot of reading. Now, my granduncle Tom had been in the IRA in the Tan War. In fact, Tom was the second in command of the Southwest Column Brigade of the IRA during the Tan War. And Tom Crawley and another volunteer called Ned Campion actually shot dead RAC Sergeant James King on the day of the truce, 10 minutes before the truce was signed. It's a long story. I describe it in the book, but King was a very high value target because he'd been extremely proactive in hunting down the IRA in the area, and they were desperate to get him. They got him 10 minutes before the truce was signed. Had he come along 10 minutes later, they couldn't have touched him, So, there was that. Now, I mean, I didn't join the IRA because of that, but, there was that on my father's side, there would have been that Republican sympathy. But at the same time, Tom, while he would have took the Republican side in the Civil War, he was a Devil era man. He actually later joined the Guards. So my father on the Fianna Fáil side would have been sort of typical Fianna Fáil, would have supported the state, would have supported the institutions of the state, and wouldn't want to see that jeopardized or attacked, but at the same time would have had a strong sympathy for the removal of the British presence in the north of Ireland, although he didn't want his son doing it, And my mother was from a Fine Gael pro-treaty background, and that didn't mean that she was anti-Republican, but she certainly had no sympathy for the provost. But basically, to cut to the chase, I heard no Republican propaganda at home. In fact, it probably would have been the opposite. I mean, when you grow up in Ireland on RTE and the Irish Independent, you're not going to hear too much pro-Republican propaganda. And
they're very careful not to. Yeah, they're very careful.
And in fact, and the thing is, I had no mentor. I had nobody influencing me. It was strictly my own study and my own belief system. And an important factor to remember is that growing up in the United States, I grew up in a republic. I grew up, we used to say the Pledge of Allegiance every day in school. And, certain parts of that pledge, would have resonated with me, the republic for which it stands, one nation, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And I believed Ireland deserved the same, But again, when I first came home and joined the IRA, I suppose I would have been, while I was strongly Republican and nationalistic in that sense, over the years, as you get older and you mature, your politics develop. And while I got a deeper understanding of the situation and all that, I never altered my view to this day that Ireland should be one nation, and it should be a 32 county national democracy within an all Ireland republic. And I still believe that.
Do you remember? Do you remember at what age maybe the thought first occurred to you that what I think I'd like to pursue this fairly perilous and kind of and dangerous path of joining like an unofficial army. Do you remember like a particular age?
Well, there was no epiphany. It was a gradual process. But at 16 or 17, I would have felt strong, sympathetic, but I was living in an area where there wouldn't have been much sympathy. You wouldn't hear it, and I didn't really hear it at home. But I just had a feeling, just a sense, my own, within my own belief system and my own, personality traits, that men and women fighting for the full freedom and independence of their country must have something going for them. And I wasn't the type of person who liked to sit back and support something and not, actually put my own money where my mouth was. I would have felt sort of maybe almost embarrassed to support something and not help it myself. So I decided that I was going to do my best to get involved. So that's the course I took. And joining the Marines was really for two reasons. One was, part of it was to test my commitment, because I knew if I went and joined the Marines and I was away for 4 years, I suspected, and it did happen, that I would get other career opportunities and other diversions and distractions. And I knew that if I didn't succumb to that or didn't accept that and still came home and joined the IRA, then I knew that my commitment was very serious commitment. So it tested that, but also the professional military training was good for my own professional development. Now, I didn't think that the IRA were waiting on my help. I believe the IRA were this professional, highly trained guerrilla organization that I kept hearing about. But I realized later I kept hearing about it from the British. They kept saying this. It was a different story. I found actually when I joined it. But at the time, I have to say that I didn't join the Marines with a view to coming home and I was going to be any particular benefit to the IRA or anything like that. I wasn't that presumptuous. It was simply that I believed in the struggle for Irish freedom and I wanted to take part, and that was basically it. I felt Ireland was my country, and I would have looked on it quite simply that fighting for your country is something you're supposed to do. I wouldn't have looked at it as odd or anything.
Right, I see. Okay, so you sorry, how soon after secondary school did you go join the Marines? Was it straight away?
I went straight. I didn't do my leaving. I was good in school. Like I got all honors in my intercert and all that, and I was very good in school. I know my mother was very much hoping a good university and get a professional qualifications, but of course, I didn't tell my mother or father I wanted to join the IRA. I just went to join the U.S. military, and so I left. I think in my leaving year, I didn't do my leaving, but I finished the equivalent in America. I did the high school diploma once I was in the Marines, and later on, when I was in jail years later, I did a open university degree in political science. But so I kept up education. I always liked reading. I mean, it wasn't that I didn't want an education. I just wanted to pursue this other path.
I see. Okay, so you go over and join the Marines. What was that like? It was your first taste of anything.
Yeah, well,
anything military.
Yeah, well, as I've often said, most military movies and films and depictions of the military are often quite fake. But if you want to know what Marine Corps boot camp was like when I was in it, if you've ever seen the film Full Metal Jacket, that boot camp there, that was exactly, I mean, it's uncanny. Even some of the stuff he was saying in it, like, I didn't know they stack shit that high in steers and careers come from Texas. I mean, it must be a script. I mean, almost every single thing he said. See, he was a former drill instructor himself. Lee Ermey, the guy who played the drill instructor, he had been a real drill instructor. And boy, he had it down. And everything, the racks are called bunks, the way they were laid out, the squad bay where they were. I don't know if people have seen the film. There's a hygiene inspection where they're standing on the lockers and they're showing, we had to do that every Thursday night. And just, I'd have to say, if you want to know what Marine Corps boot camp was like at that time, I don't know what it's like now, but when I was in, that is exactly how it was.
Really?
And yeah, and the Marine Corps boot camp was, you do very little military training in it. You qualify in the rifle and that, but it's really a 13-week sort of harassment and to test your mettle. It's only really when you leave boot camp that the real training begins. And after I left boot camp, I went to advanced infantry training school. And while I was, there was an interesting incident when I was in boot camp. I describe it in the book where I was called out to an administration block and I was asked would I learn Chinese for a group that no longer exists. It was called the Naval Security Group. And the reason they asked me is they told me that I had a very high language aptitude result on my entrance exams. And they told me that if I did this course, if I decided not to pursue a course in the Marines, that when I got out, I could get into the FBI or the CIA, and
the irony. Oh my God.
The irony. and here's me wanted to join the IRA, which of course I didn't mention that idea. They probably would have hung me on the spot. But so I declined, and I just explained that I didn't want to make it a career. I wasn't going to make a military career. And when I went to advanced infantry training school, I had another fantastic opportunity. I was called out to another office, met a young naval officer there, and they told me they wanted to send me to the U.S. Naval Academy in Annapolis. With that, they would take me out of advanced infantry training school. When I finished advanced infantry training school, AIT, they were going to send me to a 9-month prep school, 4 years of the academy at Annapolis. After 2 years of the academy, I could choose whether to become a commissioned officer in the Navy or the Marines. And then I had to give 6 years guaranteed service. So right there and then they were asking me to sign away 10 years of my life. But I was determined to come home and join the IRA. Of course, I neglected to mention that to them. But it was a fantastic opportunity because it normally takes a recommendation from a congressman or a state senator to go to Annapolis. So, but I'd say that if it wasn't for my Irish Republican beliefs and ambitions, I probably would have jumped at that opportunity. But I didn't take it, and I stayed on my path to do what I wanted to do. So I eventually got into recon, which at the time was the Marine Special Forces. We were trained to work in 4-man teams behind enemy lines, calling artillery, naval gunfire, airstrikes, carry out reconnaissance, and all kinds of missions behind the lines. I was trained in parachuting, scuba diving, coming in and out of a submarine underwater at night, infiltration. So it was very interesting. And then later on, I became an instructor at the Marine Amphibious Reconnaissance School at Little Virginia. And we were stationed there, in the same compound as SEAL Team 2. So it was even though I was only in there 4 years, it was a very immersive 4 years. It was very intense and constant training. So it was a good experience.
Let me ask you, among the fellow trainees in the Marines that you would have been more friendly with or close with, did you ever even hint at what your real intentions were afterwards? Did you let it slip at all?
I did, but in a joking way. And the way it happened was, I'll never forget, the first time it ever happened was I was in Okinawa and I was firing what's called an M203 grenade launcher. And it's a 40mm grenade launcher under the M16. So my first shot, I hit a barrel 200 yards away and blew it to pieces, right? So all the guys started cheering. They were saying, "Oh, you're going to go back and join the IRA. We know what you're going to do." And I was saying, "No, I'm not." So I started to get because they all knew I was from Dublin. You see, I've been living in Dublin. They knew I my parents were in Ireland, and they knew I wanted to go home to Ireland someday. So I got the slagging a lot. So then sometimes I would say, "Oh yeah, that's what I am going to do. I'm going to go home and join the IRA," and they'd say, "Yeah, bullshit," this type of thing. I'm sorry, I'm a bit chesty. I'm sorry about the coughing. So in a joking way, but it was the first time that ever came up was with them, just joking me, and "Oh, that's what you're going to do, and we know why you're here." But little do they know, that was my intention.
Okay, so you did the 4 years, did quite well, and you said you wasted no time. You were discharged in the morning, and by the afternoon you were flying across the Atlantic.
Yeah.
Okay, so was it Dublin or Roscommon you went back to?
It was Dublin. My parents had moved to Dublin by then, and they were in Dublin. So, well, I still had the same problem that I had 4 years previously. How do you get into the IRA when you don't know anybody in it? Unlike the U.S. Marines, the IRA didn't have recruiting offices. So, but eventually, what happened was I deliberately got a job in a place that was doing building renovations with a fellow who I found out had been a Republican prisoner in Portlaoise prison. So I knew he had IRA connections, but I was also told he had left them and all, which he had. So I got the job there, and I sort of latched onto him, and I think he guessed within 2 or 3 days my intentions because of the line of questions I kept asking and all that. And he actually tried to discourage me. He says, all you're going to get out of this is death or prison. But I kind of put that down to maybe somebody who wanted to excuse their own retirement from the struggle. I sort of brushed it off, I mean, I knew there was dangers, but like anything else, I wasn't thinking about the danger. I was thinking about the contribution I could hopefully make.
So, sorry to interrupt. What year was this now? You were
This would have been
50s?
This would have been 1980.
Okay, 80. Yeah. So I mean
before the Hunger Strikes.
We'll say like the height of the
height of struggle.
Yeah, yeah. Kind of mid 70s and 70s. Yeah. Okay. So it was fully God. It was fully on at
Was
that
fully
stage.
out of the stage, and I was 22 years of age. And so, but he must have mentioned it to somebody, because eventually a fellow from County Tyrone approached me and said, "I heard you're interested in joining." And he was in the IRA, although he didn't tell me that. And so there was, there was a period of meetings and lectures and a bit of investigating my background. But eventually I was sworn in and I became a volunteer. Yeah. And
Okay, but oh yeah,
sorry.
I was going to say you become you become a volunteer. Was there any idea of what you would be doing, or was it a case of kind of go back to what you were doing and you'll get orders?
Well, the thing about the IRA was it was an organization based very much on initiative. You didn't really get orders as such. They didn't. Uh, if things happened, it really happened because maybe a unit got together and made it happen. There was very rarely the case where orders came down, do this or do that. It was a volunteer organization, so you really couldn't order people. You couldn't really order people to do specific things. Uh, I noticed, if you read, like Tom Berry, or you read Ernie O'Malley in the Tan War, it becomes clear that different areas were good or mediocre depending on the caliber of the leadership in the area and the determination of the men. So if you had a good officer, if you had good men determined to resist the enemy to the best of their ability, if they had courage, if they had commitment, you could be quite effective against what we would look on as the British occupation forces. Other areas might have been not so active. Some people would have done like the bare minimum and things like that. It wasn't like a professional force that that was run by a government or a state. Very much a volunteer organization, very ad hoc. And one thing that I learned, that there wasn't really one IRA, as I say in the book. There was really a dozen different IRAs, depending on the area you were in, the level of local support, and particularly the most important thing I found out was the caliber of the leadership in that area. Sort of
Really?
determined everything. Yeah.
See, interesting. Okay, so you joined up. Was there any kind of training process? I mean, you already knew better than most how to use weapons and so on, but in any other areas like
Well,
counter surveillance or bombs or anything?
the training, there is a training process in the IRA, but I found it very poor. I was very surprised at the poor level of training, and sometimes the training was actually quite counterproductive, because sometimes people were told the wrong thing. An example would be, I remember men being told that the British Army infantry helmet was impervious to high velocity rifle fire, which it wasn't. Sometimes people would be maybe encouraged to fire on fully automatic, which would be completely wasteful and totally inaccurate way to fire a weapon. Remember, in the Marines, we were always told, don't spray and pray. Bullets don't go where you want, they go where you aim. And the Marines emphasized, marksmanship, and, to a very high degree. I found, so there was an amateurishness in the IRA, which surprised me. But well, it shouldn't have surprised me, because I know a lot of people didn't have professional military training. But what really surprised me was, at the higher level in the IRAs, was the lack of respect for training. In the Marines, their attitude was sort of like, war is something you do in between training, But in the IRA, I actually heard members of the Army Council say that you could train a monkey to shoot. So it was a really, really bad attitude. Yes, you can train a monkey to point and pull, but you can't train a monkey in marksmanship fundamentals, or you can't train a monkey to move, shoot, and communicate as part of a cohesive team. So that surprised me. That was real shocking, because I kept hearing that the IRA was this very professional force. But again, I kept hearing it from the British. When I actually got in, I saw there were a lot of shortcomings. And it was frustrating, because they were very easily resolved, most of them. And most of the guys on the ground were very keen to learn. And the thing about it is, I mean, I wasn't the only person who had been in I was often told, for example, if I mentioned improving training, you're in a conventional army, that type of training wouldn't suit us. But they wouldn't even know what type of training I was talking about. They would just dismiss it out of hand, And I often heard different people at a higher level say, I'm sure even the Brits say we're the best trained guerrillas in the world. Now, I have to say the IRA were good. They had a good engineering department that developed a wide range of improvised weapons, mortars, rockets, and that type of thing. And they would have inflicted most of the casualties against what we would have considered the enemy, the British military and the constabulary. But on the whole, training left a lot to be desired. And another factor that I found very frustrating was many IRA men, a surprising number, had been in professional armies, like had been in the British Army. I knew IRA men who had been in the Royal Marines and the British Parachute Regiment. A lot of IRA men had been in the Irish Army, and at the time, remember the FCA and things like that. So it wouldn't have been a difficult thing to do a skills audit and put these people together. Now, I realize that because somebody has been trained to do something, they don't necessarily have the ability to train somebody else. There's a certain skill to that. But we had a lot of, say, school teachers in our ranks who could devise course structures, write lesson plans. We had artists who could develop training aids. So, I thought a lot of this was quite easily resolved, and I was starting to make, my views known. And then all of a sudden I was carted off to the States, told to go there to buy guns because I had an American accent. And I was particularly, sorry.
I see, sorry. Okay, so was there any degree of like assessing a new recruit and saying, okay, maybe this fella now would be good for the actual fighting, shooting, and so on. This fella would be more in gathering intelligence. There must be different roles,
Well, there was and there wasn't. It was really at a local level, and it depended on the local, what we call officer commanding. It wasn't really done at what we call the GHQ level, General Headquarters level, or at the national level. And sometimes things were done. I've seen cases where men had, skills we could have done with that might have been caught on a training camp or caught on something silly. For example, I remember somebody telling me one time that they had a recruit who worked in the Irish Department of Justice, and they got him caught on some silly operation that he shouldn't have been on. Whereas, 30 years later, he could have been, a huge intelligence asset for us.
Yes,
there was a lot
more valuable.
Yeah, absolutely. And, and I found it very odd myself that when I was told to go to the States because I had an American accent and go in and buy guns, and there was loads of people who could buy guns in America who had American accents that were sympathetic to us. And I just found it very, very disconcerting that I had been an instructor in a special operations group in the U.S. Marines, and that certain people in the IRA felt that at the end of the day, the only asset I could contribute was my accent. So I found that just absolutely, I just couldn't get my head around that. But I was told in those certain terms I had to go, or either that or leave the IRA, and it was hard enough to get into the IRA, so I didn't want to leave. So one day I was given a.
Sorry, no, but
Yeah.
before you headed over to get the guns, had you been involved in any other types of operation? Had you been to the north at all?
Oh, I had been involved in operations, and I do describe an operation in the book that the Brits say never happened. And anybody who reads the book will understand what I'm talking about. I had been, yeah, but I just couldn't. Yeah, I couldn't. There's no amnesty here or nothing like that, so I just couldn't. I couldn't. I only talk about operations in the book that I was arrested on, charged with, or went to trial for. Stuff that was in the public domain. Nothing.
I see. Yeah.
If I was involved in anything else, I wouldn't discuss it. For obvious reasons, I think. Yeah.
I see. Okay.
Let me put it this way: I played as full a role as I possibly could. Yeah. So, like many men did, So.
Sorry. Just before you ended up getting sent over, did you find that there were particular types within the IRA? I mean, I'd imagine to some degree there was the guys who were serious, and the other end there was guys who were just doing it for street cred, and probably in between.
Absolutely. Like there were certain men there, like, and I named Jim Lina, who was killed at Loch Gall, but a lot of other fellows like that who would have been. You see, when I was in Marine Recon, like I said, I was based in the same compound beside SEAL Team 2, so we knew those guys. I worked with the American Green Berets and different American Special Forces units, so I knew the American Special Force. I knew the Special Forces mindset and that caliber. And I found a good few fellows in the IRA would have been of that caliber, would have had that potential. and had they better leadership, better direction, and just better organization, I believe that has been as good a soldier as anybody. And on the other hand, we had our wasted space. People who shouldn't have been in the IRA. Barflies and all kinds. But on the whole, the men who were doing the operations, the actual fighting, the actual at the coalface were I found an impressive caliber of an impressive caliber. Brave. It was a dangerous life. I remember at Christmas, I'd have my dinner. I'd always think, will I be alive or dead this time? Will I be alive this time next year, or will I be in prison? Eventually I was in prison. And I'd say everybody thought the same. It was a very dangerous existence, very precarious existence. It was a life of poverty. You never had money. It was a tough life. It was a very tough life. Yes, absolutely. But I was proud to be involved in the struggle, and I was proud to do what I could for the freedom of Ireland. So, I mean, I certainly was no victim or no martyr. I willingly volunteered, and I was proud that I did. And I'm still proud that I did.
So yeah, no, clearly not a financial decision for anyone who joined.
Well, I don't know where the finance would come from. There was no money, you didn't get paid. A full-time IRA volunteer, an active service when I was involved, was supposed to get £10 a week for toiletries and cigarettes and things. I didn't smoke, but I almost never got that £10. Basically, you were in people's houses and they fed you and things like that, safe houses and stuff like that. But it was there was no financial, no incentive financially, certainly not. No.
I see. In terms, I guess you kind of answered it a small bit, but in terms of leadership, like would you have been aware who was on a level in terms of hierarchy with your commander, and who was above them and getting orders from them, and who was on your level? Was there any kind of transparency there?
No, you weren't supposed to have that. It was supposed to be a cell system, but in reality, that didn't really work too well because, let me see how, in the cities especially, everybody seemed to know everybody else, and in country areas, it wasn't as bad. Now, when you joined the IRA, you weren't told who the chief of staff was. You weren't told who the leaders were, nothing like that. You would only find that out if you needed to know, But, as I found out over time, the British intelligence knew, like they knew who was in every position, because the IRA, but by that stage was getting quite heavily infiltrated. And we know now, and maybe people familiar with the situation will have heard of Steak Knife Scappaticci, who was the head of IRA security.
Exactly. He was one tasked with finding rats. Yeah.
He was the one finding rats, and he was the chief rat. He was the head rat himself. He also, for a long time, vetted recruits. So the Brits knew who was joining the IRA from day one. Now, I don't think that happened in my case, but in the city, certainly. So, we didn't know this at the time, of course, but we were quite, heavily infiltrated. So there were things I wouldn't have known, but the enemy knew. Unfortunately, that was the case. Yeah.
Was there any even among leadership or even among like the foot soldiers, was there any degree of kind of infighting that did you hear about this happening in these kind of groups? Yeah.
No, I didn't find that. I mean, now people have fallen out over the way things have gone because of not because of the peace. I think any rational person would support the fact there's peace, but over the process, really, that we were fighting for a 32 county all Ireland democracy within a republic, and under the Good Friday Agreement, they have what they call United Ireland. But if you look at it, you can still be British or Irish, and it maintains the sectarian dynamic into the future. It maintains the British-Irish cleavage and national loyalties, and it maintains institutional links with the Crown. Our purpose as Republicans was to break the connection with England and forge a joint national civic identity, which has been the Republican project since the time of Wolfe Tone. So, people would have fallen out over that, not violently, but people on both sides of the debate could be quite bitter.
I see.
But
yeah, of course.
Sorry, to answer your question, at the time, no, everybody was on the same page. There's a saying that if you want to achieve something, you have to surround yourself with people on the same mission as you. So I thought we were all on the same mission, although I realized, years later, there were certain people at a higher level who were on a different page. There's no question about that, But I thought at the time we were all on the same mission, and that was not to achieve political careers, not to
Be hard men, or
sorry.
not to just be hard men. Yeah.
Yeah. But to achieve a political goal, which was the end of British jurisdiction in Ireland, and to unite the country, but to unite the country in the only way that matters, as citizens, not just to unite it geographically and keep that British-Irish cleavage into perpetuity, with links to the British Crown and all that. That wasn't ever. That wasn't supposed to be on the cards, So, but that's the way it goes in a lot of these things. You have people who believe in the struggle ideologically, and then you have other people who sometimes use the ideology as mobilizing aspiration around which to build a political career, but aren't really moored ideologically to the goals of the movement.
It's just a path. It's just a path.
A career path. It ends up a career path for some. And the Brits know that. And I'm sorry to cut across you there. The Brits know that, and one of their major, when they psychologically profile the movement, one of the major things that they're trying to find out is who's who. Like, who's committed to winning the war and who's committed to surviving the war. Who's committed to the ideology of the struggle and who is willing to, take a different line if another path is open. And once they identify that, they know who to take out of the equation, and they know who to maybe make into a protected species. And the Brits have been, of 196 countries in the world, the British have been or established a military presence in 171 of them. So they're absolute experts at this. They're, from their empire and all, they know how to infiltrate a movement. They know how to co-opt a movement, and they're like we were guerrilla fighters. Sometimes maybe trying to live on £10 a week. You're fighting the fifth largest economy in the world, unlimited resources, and unlimited amount of money to buy people and things like that. So it's difficult. Yeah.
Okay, so before we'll get on to your being sent over to America. Was there many? If you can go into it, was there many bank robberies at the time? I think that was a major source of funding.
It was a major source of funding, and they were called armed fund runners. Now, I was never involved in robbing banks, but there were units that did that, and later on when I met some American criminals in Boston when we were trying to get arms, they were just astounded when I told them that IRA men would rob banks and give every penny of the money over to the movement. They could not understand how you could rob a bank and not keep the money or some of the money, But I says, no, I mean, robbing a bank is an IRA operation, like any operation. I mean, you don't profit from it or expect to profit from it. And so, yeah, I found they were astounded by that, But yeah, there were a lot of bank robberies. Unfortunately, it was an awful pity we couldn't find another source of finance at the time, because it led to problems in the South, and it alienated people in the South, things like that. And you didn't want to be confronting the forces in the South either. I would have loved to have seen a situation where there was some other way to finance the movement, but without having to rob banks and things like that.
Yeah,
And, a lot of people you get the criminality thing, because then the enemy propaganda is they're robbing the banks to line their own pockets. But I know for a fact men didn't do. I can't say nobody ever did that, but anybody I knew were never involved in anything like that. And they got big jail sentences when they were caught. And there was nothing in it for them. It was just another IRA operation. Yeah. So it was unfortunate that had to happen, but it was either do that or have no money to pursue the war. That was it.
Of course. Okay, so how long had you been a volunteer by the time the suggestion started for you to come over to America and buy arms?
About 3 years. About 3 years, a little bit over 3 years. Yeah, I was in full-time active service, and which was a long time because a lot of boys didn't survive long. But see, even though I wasn't on the run, I lived like I was on the run. I was full-time, I was determined, I totally immersed myself in it. So I was never seen in pubs, I was never seen in Republican haunts. You know, I lived with people who were on the run, and I lived like I was on the run. And that's how I was able to stay clean. Plus I was in, you know, whatever area I was in, it was tight. There was no informers. It's only when I got to a higher level working for GHQ at both the arms thing and the England thing that I was getting involved in areas where there were informers and I was getting arrested at that stage. A lot of people were.
I see. I see. And just on that note, during that first 3 years, could you kind of gauge like the public support in the Republic for the IRA and their activities?
It's hard to gauge because if you asked anybody, they were all against it, and some people were saying they were against it. We're keeping men. You know what I mean? It's strange. It was strange. Like there would have been farmers there who would vote Fine Gael, who would supply fertilizer for the IRA to make improvised explosives. It was very complicated situation. There were Fianna Fáil people who would keep IRA men, keep weapons, take tremendous risks, but wouldn't vote for Sinn Féin in a heartbeat. They would never. You know what I mean? It's complicated. You know, but I think. Especially around the border, as long as the IRA wasn't making stupid, silly mistakes and not, you know, endangering or injuring innocent civilians. At the end of the day, when British troops were killed in Irish soil, I don't think there's too many people anywhere in Ireland that lost much sleep over it. I'm not saying they totally supported it, but it wasn't stuff they were losing sleep over either. And I never found any problem with support. I mean, there were parts of the country in the south. There were areas in townlands where wasn't almost a house we couldn't go to, you know. But you could be in one house, and I've seen this. I actually experienced this, being in a house, right? And then the neighbors would keep men too, but you know, they wouldn't know that. So we'd be in one house, and then the next night be in the neighbor's house. And the neighbors would say, "Don't trust those bastards next door. They're rotten. You know, they're useless." And if they, you know, and it was weird, like it was strange, you know. But on the whole, as long as the IRA was doing, you know, military operations and that type of thing, see, it was really the difference between active and passive support. Active support were people who would actively help you. Supply you with material, lifts somewhere, you know, supply you with houses for meetings, sheds, things like that. Then there was passive support. People might see armed men crossing a field, wouldn't phone the police and stuff like that. So, you know, there was very little active opposition from the public. It was sort of, had there been real active opposition, we couldn't have lasted 6 months. So while nobody would say they supported the IRA, they weren't going out of the way to harm us either. You know what I mean?
I get you. And on that note, because I guess you were operating in the Republic before coming to America to buy the guns. Among Gardai, was there the Irish cops for American listeners? Was there? Did you ever get the sense that like the Gardai were interested in stopping the IRA or hindering them in any way?
Well, it depends. A lot of it was on individual guards. Now, the special branch were very proactive against the IRA, and very some of them were enthusiastic to an amazing degree in helping the British. I mean, absolutely nearly over the top. But most guards I met, as long as you didn't do anything in the state, you know what I mean? You know, as long as you didn't. And then there was guards. I mean, you know, the guards would deny this and all, but I know for a fact that men were stopped, especially in the early 70s. Men were stopped at border checkpoints, the boot open, full of guns, close the boot, didn't see nothing, drive on. I mean, that absolutely did happen. And I have, you know, and I know for a fact that there were some guards were sympathetic. And yeah, at the end of the day, they're Irishmen too, you know. But a lot of it depends on the situation in the north. You know, after Bloody Sunday and things like that, you know, you get an upswell of support. And then the IRA would do something stupid and civilians would be killed. And then you'd lose the support again, you know. So But overall, to answer your question on the guards and the army, I found a bit more sympathy in the army, actually. Most army guys were a bit more sympathetic. You get more information, you get maybe more looking the other way from army guys than you would. Not the officers now. The officers were real anti-Republican, but the guy in the ground very often would, not go out of his way now to cause you any problems.
Yeah, there's probably a degree of patriotism among
There'd
army
be a
men.
degree of that, they'd see the Brits there and they wouldn't, some of them on the border, they could see the Brits, they could see the British occupation, It was very strange, actually, the way the South thought of itself, in the sense that, that they won their freedom and Ireland won its freedom. And you could be in a house in the north and you could be looking out the window at dozens of British troops scouring the fields, British helicopters in the air, the place crawling with Brits. And you'd be listening to RT and they'd be talking about, oh, Ireland won its independence, and we're and it was just bizarre. It was so bizarre, uh, unbelievable. Like, can you imagine in America, like foreign troops, say in I don't know, in any part of America, Americans saying, oh well, we want our independence, and just ignoring that, like they're not, that's not there. I mean, it wouldn't happen, but Ireland's kind of a bit strange like that.
I see. Okay, very good. You were there about 3 years. The suggestion
Yeah.
came to send you over here. Yeah, tell me about that.
Well, I was called to a meeting. I was told that by a member of the Army Council, I was told that, in their opinion, I would be better off in the States because I had an American accent, and I thought this was ridiculous, And so I was given, but I had to go. So I was given a half a $5 note, and was told that the person on the other end in Boston had the other half of this note, that was torn in erratic manner, so that I would know that they were the right person. They would know I was the right person, because I think one of the things was I would have had a much stronger American accent back then, and I think I might have thrown some people going to Boston saying I'm here from the IRA, and me with an American accent, like, you know what I mean. So so I went over, and another thing that kind of disconcerted me was I wasn't told what type of weapons to get, nothing like that. I thought that maybe the IRA had a strategy and would tell me, to get this and that so we can implement the strategy, but no, nothing at all. It was vague, a very vague order. And also I was
They just said guns, did they?
guns, yeah, armalites, things like that, but it was vague. It wasn't anything particular. You see, one of the things that once I did take on the mission that I was determined to do was to standardize our weaponry as much as possible. Like, there would be IRA operations with maybe 8 men on an operation, and every man had a different weapon and a different caliber. I mean, it was a logistic and training nightmare. And I remember at the time telling people, like, it's as easy to do this the right way as the wrong way, because almost every gun store in America sells the AR-15. Say, we call it the Armalite. So, I would say just buy them, or buy the HK91, which is the semi-automatic version of the G3 at the time. Buy 1 or 2 weapons along those lines. Don't be going in and buying. I mean, there were people going in and buying like deer hunting rifles and all kinds of crap. There was almost no use to us. And I actually one time seen a list of stuff that came in a shipment from the States, smuggled in, and it was just a mishmash of different weapons and calibers, and almost nothing of any real military value. And I was just mystified as to why that was the case. So I was determined that if I had to do the operation, I was going to do it to the best of my ability and standardize the equipment. So when I got to Boston, I met my contact. He had the other half of the note. We established our bona fides. I told him that I was going to need driver's licenses or fake driver's licenses and weapons. So I was going to need contact with somebody who was willing to do that, which was against the law. So that's how I first met Jim Bulger, Whitey Bulger.
The famous,
the notorious Boston gangster. Yeah. Now, he wasn't notorious to me. I mean, in hindsight, with all the movies about him and all the books about him, like, everybody seems to know about this guy, right? I wasn't from Boston. I'd never heard of this guy. Never heard of him in my life. In fact, the person who was bringing me to meet him kept calling him Whitey. And just before I went in to meet him, he says, "Oh, by the way, he's Jim. Don't call him Whitey. He doesn't like that." I'm glad the guy told me that, because I would have gone in and said, "Hey, Whitey, how you keeping? Nice to meet you." So I met him, and one thing led to another, and he gave a bit of help, but the main person over there was Pat Nee, one of his right-hand men. Pat Nee was from Roscommon in Galway, came from a fluent Irish-speaking household. I was in Pat's house in South Boston. I could hear his parents in the kitchen speaking fluent Irish at a million miles an hour, Yeah. And Pat was also a former US Marine. So he was, we clicked, I didn't tell him who I was or that I was in the Marines at the very start. It took me a while to build up a bit of trust and a bit of a rapport with them. But it was Pat really did the heavy lifting. Pat did most of the work. Whitey wasn't really hands-on. He just more or less gave the nod. But I also think that he was reluctant to say no to Pat, because Pat was quite a hard, tough man in his own right. And he was determined to give us help. And I think Whitey didn't want to alienate Pat, So Pat Nee was really the man over there who did most of the work. It wasn't Whitey,
Interesting.
So,
Sorry, did you get the sense from Jimmy Bulger that he had any kind of maybe empathy or sympathy with the Republican cause, or was it kind of more of a business thing and
well,
not?
I'm sorry. No, well, people would
No, you're fine.
to hear that he made no money on it at all. I mean, I got donations from the States. I mean, Whitey never looked for money, so it wasn't a business thing. Whatever his agenda, I don't believe he had any strong political leanings anyway towards the Republican thing, but just an empathy towards it. But I think more than anything, he just liked to be seen as somebody who was helping the IRA for whatever agenda he had. Whereas Pat Nee was more invested in it. Pat Nee had more of a belief in it, was more determined to give us substantial help. I never really could discern Whitey Bulger's real motives in all this. I had contacts in different parts of the States I developed, and we acquired weapons, went to gun stores. Whitey gave us some weapons and things like that. And then a very surprise, but we were planning a much bigger operation. We were planning, we had actually got our hands on a steel freighter, and we were going to actually do a major operation where we were going to find legitimate cargo that we could take to Europe. We hadn't just quite identified the cargo yet, and we were going to get this going back and forth for a while, and then maybe 3 times a year it would meet a fishing vessel off the coast of Ireland and drop the guns off. And so we'd have this consistent supply, but also we hoped we'd have this business going where we would be able to finance the operation as well. So look, I wasn't a shipping magnate. I was no businessman, so a lot of this was over my head. But we were dealing with people in Boston who seemed to know how to do these things. So, like I said, we hadn't really identified a product yet, but whatever that was. So that was the long-term plan. That was the long-term plan, and we were working on that. And in the meantime, I had got a message from Ireland, a very surprising message to come home now, bring everything you got, and you'll be on the boat. So the boat we were preparing wasn't going to be ready for about 4 or 5 months. So we had to get a fishing captain to take a shrimping trawler, give him $10,000, and cross the Atlantic in hurricane season with whatever weapons I had. And I remember thinking at the time, why the hell didn't they just phone me and tell me, come home now, and if there's an issue, tell me what the issue is. I could have been home in 2 days. But no, the message was, come now, bring everything, and you be on the boat. And I was never supposed to be on the boat in the first place. For one thing, I was dead weight. I mean, even though I'd been in the Marines, I wasn't a sailor. I wasn't a fisherman. I had no real, I didn't know how to operate a fishing trawler. And I also had all the contacts, and I had, I knew the whole network. So it was kind of a ridiculous order, but orders were orders. So we did it. So we put whatever we had acquired to date on this fishing trawler called the Valhalla, crossed the Atlantic, hit a hurricane on the way over, barely made it alive. It's all in the book. I describe it very, in the book, very, go into a lot of detail on it. And we met then a fishing trawler 200 miles off the coast of Ireland. Now, we were given a longitude and latitude where to meet this boat, a certain time at a certain place in the Atlantic. Now, I didn't know what the boat was. I later learned it was the Marine and IRA, it's called. I didn't know where the boat was from. We could have been going to Donegal, Cork, Waterford, anywhere. I didn't know who was on the boat. All I know was we were to be at a certain longitude and latitude. We were there. We transferred the weapons over, and then I transferred over to the Marine and IRA while the Valhalla went back to the States. And while I was on the Marine and IRA, sorry.
So you're now on the boat that the guns.
I'm now on the Marine and IRA, yeah. So coming in, I didn't know where in Ireland we were landing. Nobody in the American end knew. In fact, when I got on the Marine and I said to one of the men, "Where are we going to land in Ireland?" He just says, "You'll see when we get there." Right? That's fine with me, no problem. So we were passing the Skellig Rocks. I was in a bunk sleeping. I'd been 14 days at sea, had been through a hurricane, and was quite the worse for wear. And I was shaken awake and was told that we're being boarded. So we were boarded by the Irish Navy and the guards. We were clearly informed on, and we were arrested. And I ended up getting 10 years in Portlaoise prison for that. We later found out. Well, the IRA did an investigation initially as to how it was caught, and messages were coming in out of the jail, and the implication being it had to come from the American end because they said there's only a handful of men in Ireland knew. And so I either trusted the wrong person or made some mistake. But I remember thinking at the time, hang on here a minute. The Irish Navy were waiting at the Skellig Rocks coming into Kenmare Bay where we were going to land. I didn't know we were going there. Nobody in the American end knew we were going there, but they knew we were going there. So it had to come from the Irish end. Later on, it became clear, after certain events, it might have been 2 or 3 years, it became clear that Sean O'Callaghan, a senior member of the IRA in Southern Command, was a Gardai informer and also had been working for MI5. And he was on the shore party who was to unload the guns when we got there. So he had told the guards we were on the way. So they were waiting on us. And there's no question he was an informer. He admitted to it later. He wrote a book about it. He called informer, right? But you see, there's many layers to this that have yet to be peeled because Sean O'Callaghan may have informed on where we were landing, but he wasn't the man who told me, "Come now, bring everything and you be on the boat." So I believe there was somebody else at their work involved in this as well. But I don't know who. I have no way of knowing who, because when I phoned the phone box in Ireland, I didn't recognize the voice on the other end. It wasn't a member of the IRA leadership. It was somebody tasked with the IRA leadership to give me that message. So I never found out who gave me that order.
And of course, and there was probably no mechanism of checking, like you running the order by someone else. There was none of that. You just got an order, and
no, I just got an order and I followed it. And then I did 10 years in jail, so there was no way. There was no way I could find out.
Okay, sorry. Okay, so the Navy catch you. You're brought ashore to Cork. Unfortunately, bad circumstances, but for great place. So yeah, go on.
So we were interrogated in the Bridewell in Cork for a couple of days, and then we were remanded. We were brought up to Special Criminal Court in Dublin, remanded in custody, and then eventually we had a trial in December, and we were given 10 years in prison. While I was there, about a year later, in November '85, I was on an escape attempt with 11 other volunteers. We had to get through 14 gates. We got through 13 of them, and we placed an explosive charge in the last gate, and unfortunately it buckled, it didn't open. So we were rearrested at the gate and got another 3 years. So I actually was doing 13 years, and with remission and everything, I ended up doing a full 10. So I went into Portlaoise prison in September '84, and I came out in September '94. And the IRA had called a ceasefire on the 31st of August 1994. So I actually got out 10 days after the ceasefire. But a lot of people thought I got out because of the ceasefire, but I didn't. I actually done every single day of my time for 10 years. Yeah.
You did all of it. Sorry, within okay, I obviously for anyone who doesn't know, Portlaoise prison is in the Republic. It wouldn't be like a Lankesh or one of them where it's specifically for paramilitaries. So within
Portlaoise prison at the time was specifically for.
Oh, was it? Sorry,
IRA prisoners now. IRA, ILA, yeah. When I was there, the only prison. Well, in E Block, the big block, there was one or two other blocks where there was what we would call social prisoners, but they were there mostly to do prison maintenance and that. Like we would clean our own areas, things like that. We would clean our cells and we would clean the landings and stuff where we would clean up our own mess, but we would not engage in prison maintenance for the state. If they wanted somebody to paint their prison or maintain their prison, we weren't going to do it. So they used to bring in, regular criminals for that type of thing.
I see. I see. Okay, so inside there was a like a community of sorts of volunteers, yeah.
Yeah, it was we had our own staff. Like, we didn't talk to the prison officers or the governor. We elected an officer commanding and a staff, and only they would talk to the prison officers, and that we just maintained this total distance, like prisoners of war,
I
and
see.
the state, for all the propaganda that they would put out, they actually recognized those structures, and they would call, like, we would call them the officer commanding, they'd call him the prisoner spokesman, but it was the same thing, you know what I mean? So if there was
Right.
any issue with the governor, or any issue with the prison, our OC would go talk to the governor personally. We would never individually talk to anybody, any
Gotcha.
prisoner.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, one of the sources of the famous hunger strikes was that the strikers wanted to be treated as political
Yeah,
prisoners as
yeah,
opposed to like a
that's
common
right.
criminal. So
Right.
you guys did get the political
We no,
prisoner.
we definitely had political status, and we would have ended up. Now that took a bit of a fight. There was a tough time getting out in the mid-70s, especially when the Fine Gael labor coalition was in that time, with the heavy gang and all that. I mean, people who might know about the history of the thing, and there were hunger strikes done. I think one some prisoners did 47, 48 days in hunger strike, and probably would have seen it through, but the state then relented, and I think men were given their own clothes, and basically they recognized Irish structures in the jail and recognized the political, because it wasn't political. We were in there. There's no way I would have ever been in jail in my life if it wasn't for the political struggle. You know what I mean? So they recognized the reality of it. So after that, there still was strip searching, and there still could be trouble from time to time. But on the whole, it was much, much, much easier for us than it was in the H blocks, where the Brits tried to keep the criminalization thing going for much longer. Then we're first forced to go on the blanket, forced to go on the dirty protest, and eventually 10 were forced to starve themselves to death, be treated as political prisoners.
What was your actual charge that you were
I was
imprisoned on?
I was charged uh, with possession of weapons and explosives with intent to endanger life, or to enable others to endanger life.
See,
That was the charge.
so there wasn't actually like a terrorism charge
Oh
attached.
no. No.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So geez, yeah. You spent you spent a decade in prison. Like
10 years.
yeah. When you got out, was geez, I mean, what was it like just being in a prison for 10 years, same routine and everything?
Oh yeah, well, I kept busy as I could. I did a university degree, and we had political lectures, and I would stayed fit, would run every day in the prison yard, and I was determined to get re-involved when I got out. I was a very committed individual, and a lot of fellows were. You see, the best thing about me being in prison for me was I wasn't married and had no family at the time. Uh, People talk about prison and conditions in prison. I wouldn't care what the conditions in prison were like. I was in a cell. I didn't care if it was 4 bare walls or if it had a jacuzzi. It made no difference to me. I mean, the reality of it is, what made you or broke you in prison was your life on the outside. If your life on the outside, if you had a wife, you had kids, if your life was falling apart on the outside, that's what made prison hell. I didn't give a damn about prison conditions. They weren't good, but I didn't care. You know, as long as one's life on the outside, isn't falling apart, that is the main thing. For most prisoners. So I did my 10 years, and I didn't like being there, but I didn't cry about it. I just got on with it. So when I got out in '94, the ceasefire had just been called, and we didn't know really what was going on. Were we running rings around the Brits, or were the Brits running rings around us? That was the big question. But we were preparing to go back to war in case the ceasefire broke down, and we did. And I was part of a team that went to London to disrupt the electricity grid in the southeast of England. The purpose of it was to cause financial and economic damage the British economy for them being in Ireland. 25% of the gross domestic product of the UK is in the London area. But our main focus would be on the City of London. The financial heart would be like the Wall Street of London, was to put the power out there so that, for however length it would be, that, so that that the business and financial and insurance and banking interests in London would say to the government, either sort this out or leave Ireland or do something, So it was just all part of the thing. But we were caught on that, and I deeply suspect an informer again. And
how long after getting out?
20 months. I was only out for 20 months, and I was caught in London on active service. And me and I think there was 6 of us, and we were sentenced to 35 years in prison. So I got another 35 years on top of that. Now, I eventually got released under the Good Friday Agreement and all that, but we didn't know that at the time. Like, we didn't know when we went in for 35 years. Like, we thought we were going to do 35 years. So again,
that's effectively. I mean, that's
the rest of my life. I mean, I'd still be there now. I'm 65 now, and I would still be there if I was still there. I'm 65 now, and I wouldn't be out for another few years. So if I was still there, I would have been in jail since I was 27 and only 20 months out in all those years. Basically in almost 40 years, I'd have had 20 months out of prison. Yeah.
Was there okay? You got out. You were clearly interested in getting it going again. Were you worried at all? I mean, now you were like on paper as being someone who was definitely involved in the IRA. Yeah. You were caught red-handed with guns. Was there any worry that maybe now you'll be watched closely? Now they know my name and what I look like.
Oh, it did occur to me, but I mean, men had operated in England before who were known. England was a bit different. They didn't really know you in England. They would watch for you in Ireland if you disappeared. Like the Gardai Special Branch and all would. Like, if you were a known Republican, you disappear, they would tell British intelligence, they would inform them, to keep an eye out for you and things like that. So it was difficult that way. But, if you went over to do an operation in England and you kept your security, you could probably, most people did, were able to do that and get home again. So, you just had to take that chance. See, you had the problem. It was a very complicated and sophisticated operation. So you had to have experienced men, if you used all clean skins, they could be inexperienced. They could give themselves away, or they could be, just the lacking in experience could cause problems. So look at, that's often said to me, but the way I look at it, it's real simple. Well, it's not simple, but the reality of it is, if you're engaged in resistance, if you don't want to get killed and you don't want to go to prison, don't join the IRA. And if you do get killed or you do go to prison, there's no point crying about it. You know what I mean? Nobody likes it, but that's the chance you have to take. And anybody who gets involved in something like that and is not, realizing the chances they're taking is a fool, and you really need to watch out for fools like that, because what they do then is when they get into the barracks and they realize, oh my God, I thought this was something else, they break and start telling everything, so to try to save their own skins, and so it's it's just the reality. It's just the reality. I mean, you see movies and Jason Bourne and all these guys running around, and they have screenwriters and script writers to get them out of trouble. We had to deal with the real world and deal with the real reality and deal with human weaknesses, and human frailties of people who want to save themselves, and people who find out that their commitment didn't really dissolve as soon as they got to an interrogation cell. But for the most part, I mean, all the boys I was caught with were strong, and everybody held up, and nobody broke, and
I'm sorry. Okay, so
most IRA guys were good lads. They were good, brave lads. The vast majority, and women.
Of course, yeah, and plenty, and there are plenty of women there too. Okay, so how many of you were over in London on this plot, and how long since you've been there were you eventually arrested?
Well, we were there was 6 of us. We came at staggered times, but I'd have been there roughly, I don't know, maybe 6, 7 weeks, something like that. Yeah. But I believe an informer was involved in Ireland. The British intelligence services said that it was just through surveillance, which is possible. But the fact of the matter is they never admit to an informer because they want to protect the informer. And the other thing is there were certain things that came out during the trial and just certain things that happened that made me firmly believe that somebody had given them information, you know. So there was a high level of infiltration of the IRA at a high level, because when you look at operations like the arms smuggling and operations in England, I mean, only people at a very high level know that's happening. And it's instructive that when I was in the IRA for 3 years in a particular area that had no informers, I was 3 years active, was never arrested, never had any problems, and was completely unknown to the security forces on both sides of the border. So, you know, when you don't have informers, you can do a lot.
How was it? How was it that you actually got caught? Like the moment they put their hands on you, we'll say.
Oh yeah, well I was about 2:30 in the morning. I was sleeping in a bed. I was sound asleep, and they just came in. They put on ambush lights outside, blinding lights into the bedroom window. They fired tear gas through the windows. They blew the front door. They came up dressed in all the black gear, all the the respirators, helmets.
The SAS, was it?
Well, I'd say they were SO19, but which was the armed response unit of the London Metropolitan Police. But it turns out that an awful lot of them were former SAS. But I thought they were SAS at the time, so that's what it looked like to me. And 1 or 2 shots have been fired. I think it might have been a negligent discharge. I don't know, but also because they were firing tear gas into the house. I actually thought they were going from bedroom to bedroom shooting my friends, and I was in the last bedroom, so I just reckoned we were getting a chop. I mean, I really thought we were all being shot. But I was arrested and just put into a white forensic suit and taken to Charing Cross Police Station and interrogated for 7 days, and charged with conspiracy to cause explosions. And a difficulty for the Crown Prosecution Service when we came to trial is there were no explosives. They didn't find any explosives or weapons or ammunition. They did find timer units for timing, but our defense was that we were going to do a hoax operation against the London grid. That we had 6 substations. We were going to put hoax devices on them so that the British would be forced to turn the power off themselves while they dealt with the devices. We didn't know how long the power would be off because we didn't know how long it would take the Brits to deal with it. Their contention was we were over there to blow them up, but we hadn't got our hands on explosives yet, and but we didn't have explosives. And an interesting thing too is their forensics couldn't find any trace of explosives on us. They can find a nanometer, which is 1/1000th of a meter of, say, septic explosive on somebody, and they found nothing on us, no forensics whatsoever. But the jury believed them, and we got 35 years. So
I was going to say good luck getting sympathy from an English juror.
well, there wasn't much hope. We knew we had no hope. We had no hope, not a chance.
During any of your interrogations, did they keep all the interrogation methods legal, or they?
Yeah, no, I have to say I got no physical abuse whatsoever. I didn't, I have to say I wouldn't. And even the arresting officers when we were arrested, they were firm, but they weren't gratuitously violent. I actually got more abuse from the Irish Navy and the Guards when I was arrested in Marine than I got from the English. No, I did definitely. And no, in fairness to them, they didn't put a finger on us. No, but you see, we were caught red-handed. Well, yeah, I mean, there was no explosives in that, but they had power units in that. And the other thing too was they'd had us under surveillance for several weeks. They had us casing some of the places in that, so they knew where we were going. So, I think there was something like 14,000 pages of evidence when we went to trial. An avalanche of, our houses were bugged, our cars were bugged, No, they were all over us. I'll give you an example. If one of us left the house, even to buy a loaf of bread, there would be 60 surveillance officers on one person. In
60, 16 or
60, 60, yeah, 60. 4 teams of 15. Each team had a mobile van with communications, secure communications. The van would have lots of clothes and glasses and wigs, so the surveillance team could constantly be changing. So we had the full resources of the UK state on us, definitely, on this operation. You know, they were determined to. I've said before, what I really could never figure out is why didn't they let us go ahead and just shoot us at the substations? Because normally they would do that. They did that at Gibraltar, they did it at Lockball, they did it many places. And, you know, to this day, I don't know why they didn't do that. The only I can only speculate. There's 2 things I speculate. One is that there was negotiations for a second ceasefire going on at the time that we knew nothing about, and maybe they didn't want to you know, jeopardize that. I don't know. Another possibility I think is that I believe our houses were bugged. They denied the houses were bugged, but I know the houses were bugged, and we had started to notice surveillance on us, or suspect very deeply that we were under surveillance. And we were actually discussing in one of the houses that maybe we should get all the guys to meet in the next day or 2 and discuss what has everybody seen, because there's something rotten here. They came in that night. So I think they thought if we all got together, and I believe that had we got together and had that meeting, we probably would have got the hell out of Dodge. Because it was very interesting that when we actually got the book of evidence and the surveillance logs from the intelligence services, that in every occasion that we suspected surveillance, we were correct. Because, you know, the surveillance logs would say the time, where it was, and everything. We were correct in every occasion. So we were deeply deeply suspicious. I'll give you an example. Me and another fellow were coming off a tube, you know, a subway. They call it the tube in London, and we saw 2 guys there doing surveillance, and everybody. They were in civilian clothes. One guy, the guy I saw was, remember, a blonde guy. He was carrying he was leaning against a bicycle and blue shorts on, very casual. But I just knew he was a cop, and I knew he was watching, not for a particular individual, but like he was searching faces. You know, it's just an instinct you get. I knew it immediately. And when me and the other fella got out of the tube station, I said, "Did you see what I saw?" And he saw another cop doing the same. And we talked about it, and we kind of agreed it was surveillance. There's no question. But we couldn't be sure it was for us. There could have been a rape, there could have been a robbery, and they could have been looking for an individual. Now, it turned out later when we got the surveillance logs, they were looking for us, but we got by them that day. They didn't pick us out. They didn't recognize us.
You spotted them, but not the other way. Right.
We spotted them, but not the other way around. But you know, at the end of the day, they did get us. But so we were very alert like that, you know. But we still got caught. So yeah.
I was going to say, just to hear what you were up against. I mean, a team of what, 6 had a.
Yeah,
what, 60 per man?
Per man, yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, anytime you went out, you know, you had the full resource. I believe I later learned that there were up to maybe 2,000 intelligence and things, you know, on it. Now they would have been, you know, in different shifts and things like that. But no, they gave it the full resources of the state to you know, to intercept us. But anyway, they did. We got 35 years. So
I see. How long? Obviously, you didn't do the 35 years, thankfully.
yeah,
How long?
we didn't do it at the time. Yeah.
Yeah. How long? How long did you end up serving before you got out?
Well, I did about 4.5 in that. So I did a total of 14 or 14 and a half years out of 48 years of sentences I was given. When I was in, I described in the book too an incident where I was approached by the CIA to become an informer when I was in jail in England.
The CIA.
Yeah. Well, he said he was CIA. He gave that impression. What happened was, I was in the Whitmore Special Security Unit, and it was several weeks after we were convicted. It was July 1996, I think. And a prison officer came up to me and says, "There's 2 people here from the American Embassy who want to talk to you." And I said, "Well, you know, I didn't want to meet them because," I said, "I have an Irish passport. I have nothing against the United States, no problem at all. but I had an Irish passport, and if I have any consular issues, I'll deal with the Irish embassy. So that was fine. He left, came back an hour later, and he says, they said you will want to see them. So then I thought, what's this about? This must be a legal issue. Maybe something to do with the Whitey Bulger case. Maybe to tell me I was going to be extradited to the States. But then that didn't make sense because I just got 35 years. And then I thought, are they going to tell me after my 35 years I'm going to go back to the States? And I didn't know. So I started to get a bit concerned. So there was 2 other IRA volunteers there, and I went to them. I says, I want to see what these guys want. But I says, if you think it's inappropriate to take the visit, I won't take it. And they says, no, you better find out what they want. There's something going on here. So I went out to the visit, and we didn't take visits from our families until at the time because they would only allow us close visits, which we wouldn't accept. So we had no visits when we were in England at all. So I went out, and there was a man and a woman there. Now the woman projected a very hostile attitude towards me. I reckon she'd have burnt me at the stake. She could have. She just extremely hostile. The man was very amiable and friendly demeanor. The woman spoke first, and she said she was from the American embassy, and that she, how was I getting on there? And I says, I'm getting on fine. And, what's the food like? I said, the food's great, best food I ever ate in jail. And then she says, are you getting reading material? And I says, yeah. How you being treated? I says, being treated great. Everything's great. See, I knew what she was getting at. She wanted me to whinge and whine and complain and start looking to deal. Well, I wasn't going to do that. I just wasn't going to do that. So she was a bit frustrated with me. And then she says, well, you certainly have nothing to complain about. She wasn't happy. But the other guy, then a big smile, and he reached out and shook my hand, and he says, John, I'm with a different agency. As soon as he said that, I knew what he meant, the CIA. And again, as soon as he said that, I knew what was coming, a sales pitch. So he said, John, I've been following your career with some interest. I says, right. And he said, John, we can leave the visiting box right now. You don't even have to go back inside. You can walk out of here with us right now. He says, we'll put you on a plane for the United States in the morning. He says, and we'll give you a lot of money. And then he leaned forward and he emphasized, John, a lot of money. He says, all we want is for you to tell the security forces where the explosives are hidden. And I says, are you aware I've already done 10 years in jail? He said, yes. He said earlier, I've been following your career with some interest. He said, yes, of course. And I said, well, then you'll know that I've been in jail before. I know what's ahead of me. I'm not going to come the hard man now and be begging to see you in a year's time. I says, I'm not going to betray my friends, and I'm not going to betray my country. It's just not going to happen. I says, as soon as I go back to the jail, I'm going to report this attempt to recruit me to my solicitor and, all this, because I didn't want to see these people again. So they got up to leave, and as the CIA fellow was leaving, I said, you shook my hands coming in here. Will you not shake it now? So he reached out magnanimously and took my hand. And I says, maybe we'll meet up in 35 years to swap some war stories. He says, maybe we will. No, he was smiling. He was, he had a pleasant thing. And I says, I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll do you a little favor, I says. I'll tell you how to defeat the IRA. I says, tell your British friends to leave Ireland. I says, allow us to build a national democracy without any further interference from their government in our internal affairs. I says, I guarantee you the IRA will disappear overnight. I said, I'll tell you something else. I says, I'm not going to charge you a penny for that information. So he just shrugged and smiled and walked out, right? So I went back in. I phoned the prisoners department in Dublin, told them of the attempt to recruit me. I phoned my solicitor, Mike Fisher, who I since learned has died. He was a lovely man. And I told him, and I phoned, I made 3 phone calls. I can't remember who was the third person I phoned, but I can't remember. But anyway, I did that because I knew the phone calls were monitored, and it was highly unlikely that it would approach me again once I reported the attempt to recruit me. Anyway, the nub of the story is the very next day, the IRA called the second ceasefire, which I had no idea was coming. So then I understood the determination and nearly panicked to see me that day, because when I went out to see them, I had no evidence whatsoever of a second ceasefire. I had no idea that was coming. So when I saw them, I thought I was doing 35 years. They knew there was going to be a ceasefire the next day, and if they were going to recruit me, they had to do it that day. So I thought it was a rather slippery move with them, but they tried it on, So, but I thought, oh my God, they knew there was going to be a ceasefire the next day. So
on that note, I suppose this time being in prison must have been different from the first, because I mean, at least with the first one, you knew it was 7 years and then an extra 3, but it's still 10. You're still.
It was light at the end of the tunnel.
Exactly.
Whereas there's no light, no light. 35 years plus, plus you were in with the prison officers. I mean, I saw prison officers there with UVF tattoos and all. You know what I mean? Also, a lot of the prison officers in there had been in the British Army and served in the North, so they were very hostile. But the worst prison officers I met, without question, were Irish ones. If you had an Irishman who was a prison officer working for the system over there, he was the worst bastard, if I can say that, you could come across every time, because they had to prove to the English that they were reliable, that they weren't sympathetic towards us. And I swear to God, if I saw an Irishman on duty, my heart would fall, because you knew you were in trouble, And I found that every time. Actually, some of the English prison officers in time could be friendly enough, and you could have a conversation with them, And sometimes they say to us, and they'd say it without malice, "Why were you over here trying to bomb us?" What and they would say, "What did England ever do to Ireland?" And we'd say,
Genuinely.
"Oh yeah, genuine. Oh, they'd be genuine, no malice. They know nothing about Ireland over there. It's unbelievable." And what did England ever do to Ireland? And we'd say, "Well, you're occupying our country," and we'd say, "What would you have done if the Germans had invaded England in World War II? What would you have done?" "Oh, we'd have shot and we'd have bombed, we'd have done this." And I says, "Well, that's what we're doing in Ireland." And then they would just scoff and say, "Totally different situation. Northern Ireland is part of the United Kingdom. We're not we're not an occupying army." And you couldn't get anywhere with them. But at the end of the day, they never hear anything else. They just know nothing. It's amazing. Irish people are so tuned in sort of England and know so much about England. But I found English people over there, they know almost nothing about Ireland. It's amazing. I remember watching a thing on telly not too long ago, and there was a movie out about the Great Hunger. Not too long ago. I'm trying to think of the name of it. Black something.
Oh, Blacks. There was a number. I can't remember the number.
Yeah.
Oh, I think it was 47. In
Black
reference
47, I think it was. Yeah. And I thought it was instructive of the way they think. There was an Irish woman going to see it, and the Conservative Party conference was on next door, and so there were two elderly couple with Conservative badges on them. So she knew they were at the conference, right? So they were coming in to see a film while they were waiting, and so they were a nice couple, and they were talking to the Irish woman for a bit, and they said, "What's that film, Black 47?" And she says it's about Ireland. It's about the famine. What's it about? And the Irish woman says, "Well, I think it's sort of a revenge movie." And the English couple says, "Right, revenge for what?" And that's it. That's the level of ignorance over there. It's unbelievable. But
I've always meant to ask. I've always meant to ask, like someone who was educated in the UK, like if in history class, do they ever like would they know like what year they stopped? What year they stopped being in Ireland, excluding the North, or would they
I
kind of
don't
have
think so.
would they have any idea?
They had an awful inflated opinion of themselves. Like I how many times I heard prison officers talking over there about how we beat the Germans in World War II, and they seem to think they were the only people involved in World War II. And I remember saying a couple of times, well, first of all, 90% of German casualties in World War II were on the Eastern Front, and I
Really,
think,
I didn't know that.
oh yeah, 90%, yeah. And I says, I think the Americans and others had a lot to do with it too, and American bombing and all that. But as far as they're concerned, they beat the Germans nearly on their own. I mean, they just have this, they're very prejudiced in their own favor. Let's put it that way.
I see. I actually on that note, it's one of the unfortunate kind of aspects of a lot of people who be sympathetic towards Irish republicanism. But there's among there's a good bit of like hatred in some cases for all British people or for Protestants, and it's a real shame because I mean your issue is with the with the government agents.
Well, I mean, I have nothing whatsoever against. I mean, I'm not against English people. In fact, I actually I remember used to enjoy reading about the Elizabethan period. I like a lot of BBC period dramas, and things like that. English literature. I have nothing against English people whatsoever. And I certainly have no sectarian beliefs. I mean, I grew up in the United States as a child, Catholic Protestant. It was absolutely a non-issue. It's something that you know, sectarianism only plays into the hands of the British because, you know, they actually nurtured the sectarian dynamic in Ireland to divide people. So
divide and conquer, yeah, divide and conquer.
See, I'm an Irish Republican. There are people who I would class more as Irish nationalists, who could sometimes be a bit more anti-English, anti-Protestant, because it's more of a nationalist thing. But I'm a Republican. I believe in the concept of a civic citizenship, and that type of thing. I don't believe, you know, I believe a Protestant can be as good as an Irishman as any Catholic. You know that, as they've proved in the past, because the United Irishmen were formed in 1791 by 28 Protestants, of whom 26 were Northern Presbyterians. You know, the when the Irish Republican Brotherhood was formed in 1858, I think 6 or 7 men formed it. Several were Protestant, and one of them wrote the oath, and it was a Protestant who wrote "A Nation Once Again." You know, so but they were Protestants of the Enlightenment tradition. The issue with loyalism now in the North comes where Protestants see their tradition as the plantation tradition, as people who were planted here by England on a civilizing mission to tame the Gael and tame the Irish, you know, and believe that they, you know, deserve that they're a unique community. Well, they're unquestionably a distinct community, but I don't believe they're a unique community, because in a republic there is no unique community. Everybody's equal under the law. Of course, you have distinct communities. Only under the British Crown system in Ireland do you have unique communities, and for years it was referred to as Protestant ascendancy. You know what I mean? So I believe in the equality under the law as citizens of the Irish Republic, and I'd like to see that for everybody across the board. And that was the goal, and I don't believe we can have that while we have the British presence in Ireland underwriting the sectarian supremacy of one small faction. You know, of Unionists who are like 18% of the population in Ireland, 2% of the population in the UK, and yet it seemed to be able to say no all the time to everybody. You know, I understand. You know, they have their point of view and all that. I don't dismiss that, but you know, at the same time, you know, look at the American Revolution. About a third of Americans were loyalists. When George Washington and his men were freezing to death at Valley Forge, American loyalists were whining and dining British officers in Philadelphia. 25,000 Americans fought for the British against George Washington. So you have this in every situation. You have this in every colonial situation, where you have people who are loyal to the old order and don't want it to change. But I believe, you know, for the good of Ireland as a whole, for the good of our people as a whole, and to progress in history, at some stage we have to have our full national liberation, and to develop a republic, a 32 county republic, because you know, I think we have a partitionist mindset in the South because of partition, and we have a unionist mindset in the North because of the Union. The first Italian Prime Minister, Adorno, said that when Italy was made up of all these city-states, and you know, when he was trying to unite Italy, he said, first we have to make Italy, then we can make Italians. And I believe in the same sense, only when we have our 32 county national democracy within an all-Ireland republic will we really build a Republican ethos and a Republican identity in people. And it's going to take a while, but the first step is we have to get the British government out of this country, because they're constantly in the mix, dividing people.
Let me go back to when you did get released. You get your message, or your meeting, excuse me, with the supposed CIA people, and then the next day, what were you just told that you'll be able to walk out pretty soon?
Oh no. The second ceasefire came in, and we didn't know. See, we didn't know what was happening. We were in jail, so we were very much out of the loop. But eventually, after a few weeks, we were put into the general prison population instead of the special security units where we were. You know, like the type of place where they put Hannibal Lecter. You know, they had this special security unit. You know, swear to God, and it was a prison inside a prison, right, with its own walls inside the prison and everything, its own everything. And when I was over there, there were over 60,000 prisoners in the UK penal system, only 18 prisoners were in special security units, and 15 of them were Irish. So
Wow.
they were really built for the IRA. There's no question. So that we were, so what happened was we were gradually put into the general prison population, which I actually didn't like. I would have preferred to have just stayed in special security units and maybe got proper visits and all from our family, because in the general prison population, it was like being, it was for the first time that I ever had to, mix with criminals. I mean, I'd always been in with political prisoners. Now I was in a general population with, rapists and drug dealers and, all kinds of people that I would not have been used to being around, And so I look on that as a backward step, even though it was portrayed as a concession. But thankfully, that wasn't too long. Eventually, we were repatriated back to Portlaoise Prison in Ireland. So I was back in Portlaoise again. And, there was no guarantee we were going to get out, but eventually things did move in that direction. And after the Good Friday Agreement, was signed in 1998, and I was released in May 2000.
You were released in 2000. Oh, okay,
Yeah.
interesting.
So I served a 48 consecutive years in prison. I was sentenced to. I had 10 years in Rudan, 3 years for the escape attempt, 35 years in England. That made 48 years. And of that 48 years, I think I did about 14 and a half of actual years in prison.
Okay, so you when you got out of Portlaoise eventually, was there any return to an IRA life?
No, not really, because of the ceasefire and all that. So I actually ended up. I'm talking to you from Clones and Monaghan at the minute. By the way, where are you based at the minute? Where are you?
I live in New York in
Oh, you're in New York, but you're in New York at the minute. Yeah,
but from Cork. Yeah.
You're from Cork, yeah. Well, I'm in Clones and Monaghan. I'm talking to you from there. So I was told about a job in a European funded prisoner center, and I went and got the job in Clones, and I got a flat, and I eventually met the woman who I would marry, and we had 2 kids, and I've been leading a pretty normal life. I was in Sinn Féin until 2007, and then I resigned from there because when they recognized the PSNI as lawful authority, as a British Crown Constabulary as lawful authority, as a Republican, I couldn't accept that there is any authority to make laws in this country except the constitutional authority of the Irish people. I simply could not accept a British Constabulary being given that right to, and they were not only telling people to support them and join them, but they were telling people now to give information to them, So I mean, I wasn't gonna wear that hat. So I resigned, and so basically from then, I've been just trying to make a living and doing various things, and my latest thing was to write the book, and it's been published on both sides of the Atlantic, and apparently it's going very well, as far as I can gather. I think the whole first print run in Ireland sold out in almost basically a month.
Oh, excellent.
Yeah, doing very well, and it seems to be going well in the States. I get the impression it's doing quite good. So, yeah, so that's where I'm at now. I'm happy in my personal life. I mean, I'm happy with my family. I'm disappointed in my political life that we didn't achieve the goals we set out to achieve, which was a 32 county republic. I don't believe that 32 county republic is there's any trajectory towards that at the minute, because they're talking about a united Ireland, but you see, there's a big mission drift here. The whole talk now is about the fight was unite Ireland, but if the fight for Irish freedom over the centuries was simply then partition, what was 1916 about? There was no partition in 1916. And what were the United Irishmen founded for in 1791 when there was no partition? It wasn't about geographical unity. It was about uniting Irishmen as citizens, to break the connection with England, and as Wolfe Tone said, to make Protestant Catholic in the center, to accept the common term as Irishmen. You know what I mean? I don't know if I said it earlier or not. I can't remember when I was talking to you, but I talked about India that has, 2.1, I don't know, did I say this before, but 2.1 billion of a population, right? 2,000 ethnic groups, right? 15 official languages, and it's one republic. we have Ireland, right? Half the size of London, right? Two basic traditions, and we can't be a united republic. And the main reason we can't be is because we have a foreign power here underwriting the supremacy of one particular faction in the north of Ireland. So that's basically it. That's where we find ourselves. Hopefully things will progress towards Republican goals at some stage, but at the minute I don't see any real trajectory towards that. But that's my own personal opinion.
Let's see. Let me ask you: was there ever a thought in your mind after the second prison sentence, and now that you weren't living like an IRA life anymore?
Yeah.
Was there any worry that maybe someone or something from your previous life would come back for revenge? I mean, maybe a paramilitary, a loyalist paramilitary, or British or anything. Was there any thoughts of that?
No, not really. I mean, the loyalist paramilitaries. You see, what the Brits done was, at Bloody Sunday and a few other and the Ballymurphy killings in the early 70s, they went on the streets to kill people openly, to to intimidate the population in the north. But they met widespread opprobrium from around the world. I mean, people in Dublin burned the British embassy. The backlash from that was terrific. So what the British did after that was they got cute and they started to use loyalist death squads to do their killing for them. So basically, I mean, I think anybody who's studied the situation here in any depth would realize that the level to which loyalists are run by the British intelligence security forces, I mean, they're completely and utterly infiltrated and directed by them. So basically, I think that the only time you really have to worry about loyalists is if the British direct them to do something. I'm not saying that, if a loyalist saw you walking down the street now, the opportunity wouldn't take you out of it. But, the vast majority of cases where loyalists were able to penetrate Republican areas and things like that, it's come out time and time again. They were directed by British intelligence. The area was cleared for them. They were given intelligence information, photographs, and all kinds of help, So basically, if anything ever started up again where loyalists were involved, it would basically be a proxy war being fought by British intelligence security forces who want to shape the strategic environment in Ireland at all times to suit them. Because Ireland is a massive strategic investment on their western flank. They are never just going to leave here and close the door behind them without having things here that suit their own strategic interests. And I don't think anybody's working harder towards shaping the way this united Ireland will be in the future than the British. The British are trying to get people in there who will shape it in a direction that will encourage the British-Irish cleavage to maintain that into the future, because that's how they have always managed to weaken Ireland, is by those divisions, by keeping those divisions intact, by divide and rule. That's how the British have succeeded so much around the world. That's how they built an empire, was really divide and rule. And they're still at it, And I think they try very hard to get Irish people to become accomplices in their own division. And sometimes they're quite successful at that, unfortunately. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So look, with any kind of group, like that, there's always the terrorist or freedom fighter kind of label. What would you say to those? What would your argument be against those who would label you a terrorist or
to me, terrorism is a form of political abuse. It's a term of political abuse. If you support somebody, they're a freedom fighter. If you don't, they're a terrorist. Now, there are acts of terror. There's no question that deliberately killing innocent civilians is an act of terror. I have no doubt about that. Now, the IRA, like armies around the world, I don't know any army in history that hasn't accidentally killed civilians. And the IRA, there were a small number of cases where innocent civilians were killed. But it was never a matter of policy. It's inexcusable. It's morally and politically wrong, but it was never done as policy to kill innocent civilians. I would not have joined an organization who deliberately killed innocent civilians as a matter of policy. I simply would have known. Like, I'm an Irish Republican. I'm a patriot. I would not have done that. But it did happen. It did happen, unfortunately. And sometimes it happened due to lack of intelligence, poor tradecraft, lack of attention to detail. And other times it happened where the dark-handed British intelligence was involved in tampering with devices and also recruiting IRA people as agents. I think that might come out in the next couple of years, a bit more information on that. But to answer your question, on the whole, the term terrorism is simply a term of political abuse. And, you know, one man's freedom fighter is another man's terrorist. It's a cliche, but it's quite true. You know, I personally was never involved in an operation that killed any civilians. The vast majority of IRA volunteers were never involved in an operation where civilians were killed, the vast majority. And I would not accept that label as, you know, I would look on us as patriots who are fighting for the freedom of our country against, you know, and the British. I mean, the hypocrisy of the British is instead of doing, you know, the killings themselves, they got the Loyalists to do it for them, you know, and you know, they became firm believer in Sun Tzu's dictum, always kill with a borrowed knife. You know, they supplied Loyalists with weapons from South Africa in 1987, Warsaw Pact at the time weapons that would, you know, distance the British state from, you know, culpability in these killings and all. So, you know, it's a bit maybe complicated to go into now in a podcast, but it's well documented. It's very well documented across a wide range of sources. British involvement in Loyalist death squads, you know, and if that isn't terrorism, I don't know what is.
Yeah, even I mean what was it called, the Miami show band massacre. They gave them uniforms even. Yeah.
They gave them uniforms, and you know, the Dublin Monaghan bombings, which are almost written out of history, very deliberately targeting civilians. Now I know, you know, Loyalists and Brits like to say, "Oh, the IRA killed civilians too," and it was deliberate. It was never deliberate. There was never ever a case that I could think of. You know, I can't imagine. You know, where it was deliberately done. You know, you know, an example could be where when there was no mobile phones, a bomb might be placed somewhere, and the volunteers wouldn't realize when they're calling in the warning that the 3 public phone boxes in a row have been vandalized or broken. By the time they get to the 4th, it's too late. Now, it's not an excuse. You can't. It's not. It's, you know. It's no comfort to the families of those who lost loved ones. And you know, I can totally empathize with that. But it wasn't deliberately. It wasn't deliberately done. Now, I know that's no. I mean, look, if somebody killed a relative of mine and told me it wasn't deliberate, that would give me no comfort. In fact, it'd probably add insult to injury. But you know, to answer, you know, the cold hard facts is the IRA did not, as a matter of policy, target innocent civilians. Whereas the British did through the Loyalists, you know, and yet we're supposed to be the terrorists and they're supposed to be the good guys. But you know, the winners write the history. So that's the trouble.
Funny actually, I only ever found out about that bomb in Dublin literally a couple of years ago. Never through history class.
Yeah,
never documentaries and nothing like that. I discovered it a few years ago. My stepfather told me, like in the shed when I was home. I didn't believe him.
34 people killed in Dublin Monaghan in deliberately no warning bombs, and it was done in May '74 during the Ulster Loyalist workers' strike, and it was done unquestionably with the help of British military intelligence and IRC Special Branch, and the Irish government panicked that people would turn against the British, and actually started pointing the finger of blame at the IRA, and came up with statements at the time saying if the IRA weren't fighting, this wouldn't have happened. You know, even though it was Loyalists who initiated the bombing and shooting campaign, when nationalists went up for civil rights. So a lot of people forget that. And within 3 months of the Dublin Monaghan bombing, the Gardai team tasked with its investigation were disbanded. Now, the Irish government knows that the British were behind that, and they want to just completely sweep that under the carpet because they can't handle the implications of that. They just simply don't want to know, you know. And terrible time, you know. But again, you know, terrorist freedom fighter, you know, it depends on your perspective. I do agree, though, that the deliberate killing of innocent civilians is a terrorist act. There's no question about that. but I would totally be against anything like that.
Sorry, just before I let you go, I do appreciate the time very much.
Thank you.
Looking back on your years in the life, are there things you wish had gone differently or you've done differently? And on the flip side, is there anything you might miss about the life?
Well, there's nothing much I could have done differently. I just wish that we had more people at leadership level who were more ideologically moored to the Republican project as a republic, and less amenable and susceptible to lures into political careers and that the British could, But there's nothing I could do about that. I just wish that was the case. There's nothing I miss about the life, really. It was a very tough, hard life. It really was, but a life of much hardship and sacrifice. There was a lot of comradeship, in prison, things like that. I mean, I don't want to be in prison, but there was that. I meet people today I was in jail with and that, and maybe was active with in the IRA. And there is a bond there that, people outside that sort of group really wouldn't understand, And things have moved on so much. Like, I'm 65 now, and I meet younger people today, and even like yourself, that you never heard of the double Monaghan bombing until not that long ago. It's just amazing, And they're really they really shy away from history in Ireland. I think because of, if you really understand the history of Ireland, if you really understand the context, it can lead only most Irish people, I think, to one conclusion, and that's the conclusion they don't want people going to. I'm not saying armed struggle, but the conclusion of that, I think Ireland must end British jurisdiction, British occupation. And I must just emphasize that the British occupation of Ireland it's not the Unionists. They're pro-British, but the British presence in Ireland is the presence of Britain's claim to jurisdiction in this country and the civil and military apparatus that makes that possible. But never would any Republican consider Unionists the British presence. They're pro-British, but they're not. I mean, and the other thing too, England invaded Ireland hundreds of years before the plantations. So for them to say they're here to protect Unionists, what was their excuse then? There was no Unionists here then. You know what I mean? So that's it. It's complicated, and it's hard to get through it all in a short space of time. I'm still learning as I go along, and I've been at it a long time.
Actually, sorry. And on that note, do you still read about Irish history and
all the time? All the new books coming out, I read them, and I read different perspectives. I don't read to confirm my own prejudices. If somebody comes out with a book and is totally anti-Republican with that, well, I will read that too, because I like to see what they're saying. I like to get their arguments, But nothing I've ever read or done has ever shaken my core belief in democracy and republicanism. I'm not a fanatic. I'm not dogmatic in the sense that I believe everything the IRA did was right, because everything the IRA did wasn't right. There were many wrong things done. But on the other hand, if the Brits weren't in this country, none of this would have happened. So I try to look at the big picture and try to be strategic about it. But I have no personal regrets for my own involvement. I'm proud of what I did. I stand over everything I've done. I was never involved in anything I would be ashamed of. I'm lucky that way. I'm lucky that way. I know some people did things that they would prefer not have happened, but luckily for me, my conscience is clear. I stood up. I stood up to the plate for this country, and I did my best. And what more can you do? I know people might agree with that, but that was what I did.
Of course. Again, thanks very much for your time.
Thank you, John.
I'll link the book below in the description on the YouTube. Yeah. Is there anything you want to leave us with?
No.
Any parting words?
Not really, John. I thanks for the time and for the chance to talk, and I appreciate it. And it's always interesting to to talk to people and get different perspectives. And I'm still learning as we go along, so it's a learning experience for anybody, and these conversations help, I think.
Very good.
Nothing's black and white. Nothing is black and white in life. Yeah.
Yeah, I get you. Okay, and for anyone listening in Ireland, I'll try to put this out this episode out pretty soon. But you're doing book signings
Yeah, well,
or events rather.
I'm doing a book signing in Dublin. I'm actually meeting a fella tomorrow. I've done one in Dublin. It was very successful. It was so successful, in fact, I've been asked to do a second one. But I'm meeting a fella in Dublin tomorrow, actually, to get the details on that. And also, I'm doing one in Cork in the Metropole Hotel. I think it's the last Saturday in November. I can send you the details on that if you like. If you have, no problem. I just off the top.
I'll send them to family here. Yeah, I have family in Cork.
Yeah. Off the top of my head, do you come home much?
Last time I was back was I believe last summer, and before that it had been before COVID. No, there would have been more, except COVID messed it up.
Yeah.
But yeah, I've been here 6 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
I've been in America. Sorry.
Say again.
I haven't been in America since 1984.
Oh, sorry. I did say I was going to let you go, but I didn't mean to ask. You said you were kind of unsure. You're kind of unsure of your status here.
I've been trying to find out, but I can't get a straight answer because I think I'm 90% sure I'm okay, but I need to be 100%. Now, I was charged in the States with stuff to do around the arms thing that time, but they dropped the charges and then they put them back and then they dropped them again. So, like, I don't know if there's anything outstanding there or not. Probably not, but I'd want to be sure. I'm actually working again, trying to find that out because I definitely go over for a visit. I wouldn't live in America again, but I definitely love to visit. Love to have the freedom to visit. Even just to have the freedom. Because for me, it doesn't feel like things are over while I still can't go places.
Right. Yeah, I get what you mean. Again, thanks very much for your time.
Thank you, John.
I do appreciate it. Thanks for everything you shared, and thanks for putting together the book.
Thanks very much. Thank you very much.
Remind us what
the book is called. Yank. My life as a former U.S. Marine in the Irish Republican Army.
Very good. Funny. Actually, just a small thing. The word Yank, I believe it was thought up of first used by Irish immigrants to, I think, like kind of New York. It started as Yankee Doodle.
Probably. Yeah. Well, the name came about. I wrote the book. I wrote every single word of that book. The only thing I didn't write was the title. The American publisher, Melville House. There was a line in the book where some IRA guys used to nickname me the Yank, and I used to say, "Please stop calling me that because you're identifying me." You know what I mean? But he liked it and it stuck, and he kind of used it as the title. So I says, "Go ahead." But that's the only thing in the book I didn't write was the title. And just when you do publish, I'll put up a link, John. Would you put up the link for the American version at Melville House? Because there's an Irish version too, but you're a New York podcast, isn't it? New York, yeah.
Correct.
Yeah. And Melville House is a New York publishing company, so it'd be much better if Americans got it from there or from Amazon.
Good stuff.